Everyone experiences conflict. In fact, you may be in conflict right now with your family, your friends, or even within yourself. Allow me to introduce you to an in-depth biblical teaching series. Coach Darrell White, who is an author, speaker, and family life coach, is thrilled to introduce you to people and families in biblical history that experience the same conflicts that you do. His objective is to use various expressions of art, the experiences of mental health professionals, or the sacred scriptures to help you with identifying and resolving various community mental health challenges. Join us now to see how the gallery that tells your story can transform our lives.
What's up, good people? This is Coach White, author, speaker, family relationship coach. Welcome to the gallery that tells your story. This is a new series, so I'm pretty excited. See you guys in a minute. Peace. All right, here's the message of the week. So for parents, what I want us to realize, and I say us because I'm being inclusive, is that what we teach our children impacts the third generation. Think about this. We are generation 1, our children are generation 2, and our grandchildren are generation 3. So ultimately, in some cases, certainly not all, what we teach directly and indirectly impacts our grandchildren because our children teach their children. So, if you are in a relationship that is verbally or physically abusive, what you are teaching your child indirectly is that love is physically and verbally abusive. I remember a time when I was mentoring a young man and coaching him, and there was a time when we had a couple of pretty hard conversations. He told me, Coach, I didn't think that you really loved me because you didn't put your hands on me physically. And that was a light bulb moment for me. He began to unpack his story and tell me about his father and how he suffered physical abuse from his father, who would also say that he loved him. And we're not talking about old school beatings here. We're talking about children becoming punching bags. So needless to say, if we are in a relationship dynamic where the father is punching the mother or vice versa, and the child is a witness to this, then I pray that this message opens your eyes, because what you are indirectly teaching that child is that physical abuse and or verbal abuse equals love. So if we're not careful, our children will go out, become adults, and seek that very thing that we don't want. Let's not be the type of parents that have to try to steer our kids away from that kind of relationship when we can do something about it now and change their perspectives. All right, good people, let's get right into this exciting episode. So we are starting a new season. This is actually season 3, episode 1. And we're going to title this The First Family. We know there's nothing but trouble coming for this first family, considering that Adam sinned. As we navigated through the scriptures in earlier lessons, we discovered that Adam transgressed, right? But before he transgressed, Eve was deceived, right? And then she fell into transgression after being deceived. No consequences occurred when she transgressed, but everything happened when Adam transgressed, right? So now we are at a place in our particular exposition and narrative as we look at the family and the issues that sin brings to a family. We're at a place now where we're about to meet the first two children to be born through the womb of the mother, right? And we discovered in prior studies, and maybe you didn't think about it in this way before, but in essence, every child brought into the world is brought in through the womb of the mother, which is the birthplace of sin. All right? So, all Adam's fault, but now we're going to look into the first family. So, scripture references today, Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 7 is so much there. I wanted to stretch it out to verse 8, but it just didn't make sense to rush it. Subscriptures. We're going to have to look back at Genesis 3:17. We're going to look forward to Hebrews 11 and 4. And we're also going to look at 1 John 3, verses 10 through 11. All right, so here we go. Genesis chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. This word knew is the Hebrew word yada, which means had relations, or we know it to mean the sexual relation had occurred, because it says that she conceived and bore Cain. Now, we know that from our prior studies of conception that this wasn't anything but a very painful conception, right? Because we see that as a result of the judgment given to the woman. So again, now Adam knew, had sexual relations with Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, which is the name Ish, I-S-H, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Literally a man child, right? Verse 2, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, so we see their occupations as they get older. But Cain was a tiller of the ground. Very interesting to note that he was a tiller of the ground. We're going to come back to that. Verse 3, and at the end of the days, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. And I said that slowly on purpose. I promise you we're going to get back to that. Verse 4, Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, or their fat portions. And it says in the next portion of verse 4, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering. This word for respected is translated had regard, according to the lexicon. So it would read, and the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. Verse 5, but he did not respect or have regard for Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. This is the first instance where what we call today the mean mug is applied in history. All right? So what can we learn from these verses so far? So I took a moment in my study, and I literally wrote down Cain on one side, Abel on the opposite side. And here are the notes for Cain. We know that, according to the record, he brought an offering before his brother Abel, right? We know that his offering was of the fruit of the ground, right? So produce. We know that by vocation, he is a tiller of the ground. But here's what's interesting. When we go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, and it says, in part, then to Adam he said, he being God, cursed is the ground. And what's interesting is that Cain is a tiller of the ground, right? But the ground is cursed. Now, you do what you want to do with that. But that's what we know about Cain. Now, what do we know about Abel? We know that he brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions, which is the best, right? We know that by occupation, he is a keeper of the sheep, right? And we know that he brought his offering after Cain brought his offering. Not that that matters. We're just going according to the record. But Hebrews 11:4 tells us a little more about Abel. It says, by faith, the word pistis, the Greek word, which can be translated to mean belief or trust. By faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained, Abel, witness that he was righteous. This word righteous, dikaios, which means approved by God or conform to God's standards. And then it says, God testifying of his gifts. All right. So what I did in my notes under Abel, I just added a few things. He offered a better sacrifice. And because of the sacrifice, he was approved by God and he met God's standard. All right. So take all of that into consideration. Now let's jump back to Genesis chapter 4 and let's look at verse 6. So then it says, so the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? Notice verse 7, very interesting. If you do well, will you not be accepted? The lexicon translates it, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door. This word, or those words, sin lies at the door. The lies at the door portion can be translated or is translated according to the lexicon as is crouching. Is crouching at the door like a four-legged animal, right? And its desire or its longing is toward you. But you should rule over it, or you must master it. All right? So, then I want to take a look at 1 John chapter 3, verse 10 and 11, and kind of introduce us to what's going to happen in verse 8 when we visit that next week. 1 John chapter 3, verses 10 through 11. It says, in this the children of God and the children of the devil are manifest. The word for manifest is phanera, which means obvious. In this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is he who does not love his brother. Verse 11, for this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. So, just for a footnote in closing, what's interesting is that rather than being repentant, Cain was hostile toward God, whom he could not kill, and jealous of his brother, whom he could kill. So for you, the audience, I would like for you, in your reflection, to name a time when the favor of your friends, siblings, or relatives breeded jealousy and hostility towards God. Or I want you to name a time in your reflection when your anger aroused you to bring harm to your siblings, friends, or relatives. Coach White, signing off. See you guys in the next one. Peace. Wow, what another exciting episode. I hope that you guys are able to take some key points away. We continue to navigate through this series. Hope you guys check in with me. Again, this is Coach White. See you next time. Peace.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Gallery That Tells Your Story with Coach Daryl White. I hope today's episode encouraged much introspection and self-reflection. Be sure to join us again next week at the same time and the same channel. If you missed any of the prior episodes, please be sure to check the show archives. And if you're a mental health organization interested in learning more about partnership opportunities with Coach White, or if you're an artist interested in being featured on any upcoming episodes events, please contact Coach White directly at 443-785-7010. Again, that's 443-785-7010. And peace.